Now it's time for some more Battle of the Planets. But it isn't actually about this one. Now, if you've been tuning into this channel for a while, you'll know that I, not so long ago, picked up some rather nice boxed God Phoenixes. Phoenixi? I don't know. More than one of them, anyway. But this got me thinking, because on the back of the box were these guys. We had a Helix Sky, we had a Sky car, we had a Sky tank, we had a Moto Sky, yeah. And also we had a Sky plane. You'll notice that they've all got the word Sky in them. Yeah, okay. So that got me thinking, and I thought, I don't recall ever having any of those personally. But I wonder if I could get some to look at just to see sort of how they compare with the God Phoenix size-wise and just in general, because they're poppy and I'm quite into my poppy models at the moment. So without further ado, let's have a look at them. So as you can see, the first one is the Eagle Sharp. Now that's what it's called in terms of its sort of English name, if you like, because again, we've got this sort of the dubbing and so on sort of issue. So I think that the names we're seeing on the back of the box are actually the sort of Italian names that they would have been called in the Gatchaman cartoon that Italy would have had. And bear in mind, these are not from the Battle of the Planets cartoon. They're actually from the second series of Gatchaman. Now, I'm not quite sure how it worked in Italy. So maybe in Italy they kept on calling it Battle of the Planets because La Battaglia di Planeti sounds a lot like Battle of the Planets to me. So maybe they were still choosing to use that terminology in Italy, but they kept going with the series and they didn't do a Sandy Frank to it like they did with Battle of the Planets and Gatchaman. But this is G1, this is the Eagle Sharp. Now, Gareth very sensibly noted to me that these things would be incredibly expensive, and he was not wrong in the sense that if you try and get them boxed in mint condition, yes, they will be extremely expensive. We're talking about £200 a pop probably, maybe a bit less, but somewhere along those lines by the time you actually got them in from wherever they are, because they're not that common here. Although ironically, this is what really made me laugh actually when I was starting to look into this, is that the eBay seller who sold me this God Phoenix was also selling all of them in their boxes in this country just before I picked up the two God Phoenixes from them. Had I but known, and had I had that thought process at that point in time, I could have got all of them, although I wouldn't have been able to afford all of them. But it would have been really nice to get them mint in their boxes like that. But of course, not their original Japanese boxes, but their sort of European boxes, which were like these. But in any event, what I wanted to mention primarily in this video is really what to look out for if you're thinking about getting this particular collection of Poppy models, because they are very frequently missing elements which may or may not be that obvious. So as you can see, this is a G1, so you've got stickers on pretty much every single sort of wing element going there, which is nice. You've got these sort of three-pronged talons coming off the end of the wingtips there. You've also got a Mark figure. Now, he probably wasn't called, well, in fact, he definitely wasn't called Mark in all of the iterations of Battle of the Planets, but there we have a Mark. So you're looking for one of those in the cockpit, in an ideal world. There should also be a cockpit canopy. So there should be a clear canopy. As you can see there, there should be a clear canopy going over the top of him. That's one of the rarer things to find. You'll also notice that there are these prongs at the front here. I have one snapped off here, but obviously these should be mirrored either side. And generally, yellow paint, red paint, all in good condition. Now, there's a lot going on the underside. This actually sort of comes out like this, and then it does all sorts of stuff. So I'm not quite clear on exactly what the overall point of this thing was, although it may have shot missiles out of here. I think this is slightly broken here on my example. So this may not be the best example to be trying to do it with, but I think this does extend a bit more somehow. I'm not going to force it though, because as I say, it's already quite breaky on this example, but that's the sort of the front landing gear for it in effect. So it's a little bit weird. I'm not quite sure what they were thinking of there in terms of functionality, but there would have been missiles here, and obviously those are the sorts of things that are frequently missing with this sort of example. So you can see those in there. So rather than air intakes, those are actually missile points. And there are there are 3 buttons here. So there are buttons there for the missile launchers, and I assume that would probably have maybe flicked the cockpit up, maybe, or it did something down here in this unit, which I'm not aware of. So this is PB63 in their sort of nomenclature for Popy models of this type. But again, it's die cast, pretty heavy. The wings, some of the wings, these wings are plastic, but these wings are not. These fixed wings here are metal, so they're quite nasty, potentially quite nasty if you're a child. But yeah, so if you were looking for one mint, you would be looking for a canopy, and that immediately adds a lot of cost to it. Inevitably, missiles, again, more cost, and so on and so forth. Should also have, just mentioning, because I have seen some missing them. There should be engines on the back there, twin engines. Mine are quite nice and silvery. So I mean, this example was I don't know, it was like 20 quid. There's a button there as well. I'm not sure if it doesn't seem to be doing anything. I'm not sure what, but these wings do move. These wings flatten down like that. So there's a little bit of movement there, then they sort of spring back up. So that's probably a release for the wings. I'm hesitant to push them all the way down, but I can try. Yeah, there's definitely... So they definitely fix like that, and I imagine this then is the release for them, if I haven't broken it, of course. Oh dear. Yeah, that's about par for the course for me. In fact, that freed it up, so I imagine that should be pressable to pop the wings up if it were fully functional. But I quite like it. It's quite a cool little jet. And as I say, this is from Gatchaman II, so it's the second series of the Gatchaman anime. And I think this did dock into the Phoenix, but there are slightly more vehicles for this iteration of the series than there were for the original one. So let's move on. Now, I should just point out with this one that the box that I'm using here is the box for the smaller God Phoenix. So this is the PB73 God Phoenix. So in terms of scaling, these are not huge, but they're quite sizable. Now this G2 Condor Attacker, which is the Sky car here, this has always puzzled me, because in a lot of the photos I've seen of it, its wheels had mysteriously disappeared, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out how it was doing it, because there didn't seem to be any separate pieces. But to my amazement, when I actually got one in hand, the wheels actually move with the thing that hides them. So they turn out like that, and then you get a sort of a Back to the Future style flying car off the back of that shift. So I just think that's mind-boggling. They actually built in that sort of functionality, that transformation functionality into the toy itself without you needing to have something separate to do it. And I just never seen anyone demonstrate that in the videos that I looked at, so I didn't know what was going on. But as you can see, we're up to PB64 now. You can see that now. And obviously G2, so this is the second of the ancillary vehicles. And this one, rather nicely, has the figure in it. So this does have the canopy, unlike the G1 example that I showed you. Assuming I can actually open it, because it does open. There we go. Now I assume that this figure is, I don't actually want to force it, but I think that would be removable, because I have seen it missing in other examples. But even for what it isn't, it's still got a bit of a classic sort of Battle of the Planets figurine sculpt going on. It's not in massive detail, obviously, but you can see the beak on the helmet, so a little bit of detail there. Now, there is something wrong with this. Now, you might think that it actually looks like it's in pretty good condition, and it is. It is. It's got both the fins on either side there, which I'm sure are quite breaky over time. The beak's in pretty decent condition as well. And what I really like about these is the little sort of eye detail, the eye stickers that they've got, just to make them look that little bit more predatory as vehicles. I just like that. It appeals to me. It's got good stickers, but it is missing a key component. And if you can see here, there should be a glider that fits on top of this section here, and it just isn't there. And obviously, being a completely separate piece, it is frequently missing. I think that Gareth from Cosmic Toys did have one the other day, but I hadn't quite formed my thought process about getting these at that point. So that one had already gone by the time I thought about starting to gather these together. And it's taken me a little while to gather these, which is why I've been slow to make this video, because I wanted to do it with all of them, just so I could show you the full whack when I completed them. But I would definitely be on the lookout for a glider for this one, just to pop on the back there, because then it would be complete. Because the rest of it's in really nice condition. No box, obviously, but again, I didn't pay through the nose because it isn't complete and it isn't boxed. So, as an example to show you, and just for display purposes, it's absolutely fine. It'll more than do. And again, this one's very, very die cast. Now then, so this is Jun's bike, which oddly isn't called whatever it's called. It has her name on it, which is curious. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have, so unlike the other vehicles, it doesn't have its sticker on to tell us what its official name is. So from the back of the box, this is the Moto Sky, and it's G3. Now, this one I got lucky with, really, because I've seen several examples of this on eBay that simply miss lots of elements of it. But this one actually set me down the path of doing this video in the sense that I realised after I'd got it that it was actually slightly more broken than I thought it was. Not ridiculously, but slightly. So, if you can see here, there is a little tiny gap here. And the reason that there is a tiny little gap there is that there should be an exhaust pipe assembly coming off here, sort of chromey exhaust pipes assembly, which is obviously missing on both sides. But you could easily be forgiven for thinking that this is otherwise complete. Now, there should also be a figure, of course, because there's a seat. But as you can imagine, it's not an enclosed cockpit like on the other examples. So, although the wings and everything else are still there, which is great. I'm now looking at it, trying to remind myself if there was supposed to be a wing there, but I don't think there is according to the pictures, no. So, it should just have these wings. But again, it's quite cool. It's got sort of the flippable wings, and there's lots of play value there. Again, missile launchers here and here. It's missing one handlebar, but I already knew that. But again, for display purposes, you can kind of get away with that. But it's got the canopy, which is a nice sort of element to it, and it's got a slightly peeling eye sticker, but it's not bad. And the other one's okay as well. So again, it just appeals to me. It reminds me slightly of those flying bikes that were in that Battlestar Galactica 80s reboot, made in Singapore. And where are we up to? I think this must be about PB65. It's quite strange in the sense that there isn't a lot of printed detail on this one. I'm just having a quick look around to see if it even says Popy on it. But maybe they felt they didn't have enough space to fit it in. I think one of its wheels. Its wheels are there's a little bit of rubber missing on that wheel, but obviously the rubber is one of these things that perishes over time. So in that sense, it's not surprising. But again, you can hide it into the body, so it'll display quite nicely. It's not really a major issue. But I like it. It's a cool bike design, and it's got a little kickstand on the bottom of it, and plenty of stickers. But it's quite interesting in the sense that it doesn't have quite as much detail as the or in terms of sort of numbering and identification as the other examples do. But it's a cool bike. And then we get onto the Helix Sky. Now this is one that I've seen quite a few seriously busted up examples of. No two ways about it. This thing gets battered, bless it. And I'm showing it to you like this for a reason, because this is not complete, but it is complete. Yeah, I know. So basically, what you often see is this broken. But as you can see, this is complete in my version. It should have missiles here and here, and it should have a little red beak here, which of course mine does. And it's got these cool eye elements where they actually flip open, so you can see the figure inside, which is inside. So again, this is a good example. This is actually the most expensive of the ones that I've got. And the reason is that, its tail's actually slightly squiffy, technical term. It's not quite as parallel as it should be, and I'm hesitant to try and do anything clever with it. You can see there's a little bit of a indication of stress already there, so I think somebody bent it. And obviously if I try and bend it back, the odds are it's going to go bye-bye. So I'll probably have to leave that. But what you often see is it's, without these side pieces on the cockpit, certainly with that broken off, or completely missing. So again, it's one of those ones where you do have to really look at the overall quality of it quite carefully if you're bothered about that sort of thing. However, what you might notice here is that there should be propellers on it. There should be a wing element to it. And that is far from frequently present in the eBay examples I saw, but it was on this example that I saw. So rather happily for me, I was able to get this for not too much compared to, say, having to get a box example to get it complete. And that just slots in there. Now, I'm not sure if in the series this was a sort of a slightly separate element that could, fly off and do its own thing, was somehow offensive. But that to me really sort of fills it out. That makes it very sort of complete as an aircraft, and makes it make a lot more sense. So if I had missiles for it, that would be in reasonably good condition overall. It's got all of its wheels are there on the bottom of it as well, and there is a little tiny. See, all of these are taking slightly different routes to identifying themselves. This one's actually got a shiny G-Force sticker on the back of it. I can't see, looking at it, whether or not it mentions its PB code again. Which is kind of odd, because I don't know if that was a thing at this point in time, that they weren't adding those on to everything they did, but normally they're quite careful about mentioning the PB numbers, but it isn't there. So I would think we're up to about PB 66 maybe at this point, something like that. But this one's flown by Keop. In my language it's Keop anyway. So he's got his little helicopter that he's buzzing around in, and this is G4. So again, really nice die-cast Popy toy, if nothing else. And finally, we have G5, which is the Sky Tank, piloted by Tiny, who isn't. Now, I think this is called the Hound Tank in English language translations of it, I think. Because I've certainly seen that mentioned. And in fact, normally it would have a sticker saying Hound Tank down the side of it here, as they normally do with the sort of, the international variants of it, just to announce what the toy is called, should you ever forget. Now, obvious things missing from this one include the tracks, because obviously it's a tank and it should have tracks. They're quite light grey treads as well, so I'm not sure that you could easily swap in a random tank's treads, but I guess you could in theory. Now, one of the little things missing from here is a little tiny sort of radar antennae kind of module here. Now, in theory, I may have one of those coming. I say in theory because I think I ordered it from Mexico. So whether or not it ever actually turns up is another thing entirely. But in theory, it would come with another one of these because it wasn't expensive, so it was really a shot to nothing. But I've got two nice guns up the front there, which are complete. And again, really nice eye decals there, so it does look pretty sort of scary, threatening. Turret turns around, obviously it would have had missiles here and here. Now, this one puzzled me when I first got it, because there's a lot going on at the back here. And I thought perhaps it interlinked with something, because this front segment actually opens up. And I thought, what on earth is that for? Does it interconnect with some of the other toys? What's that for? But I found out since that actually what you would do is you would load balls into here, and then this would have been the projectile launcher. So you do it like that, I think. So it's almost like a pinball launcher, and that would shoot projectiles out of the front of it. So that was its little sort of USP, is my understanding. So that's why the head comes up like that. Which again, just does endear it to me quite a lot, because it just means it's got that extra little bit of functionality, which I thought was quite clever. Now this one is big enough that they've put so we're up to PB67, so I think I was keeping track reasonably well there. And again, this is Singapore. It doesn't actually seem to mention Poppy, but then that may well be foreign language Poppy in there somewhere, I guess. But the PB's, a clear giveaway that's where it's from. So again, it's one of these odd ones in the sense that I have no idea how these would have come to be in this country, apart from the fact that maybe Bandai UK was importing them. And so they were, again, sort of branding them as if they were from Battle of the Planets, even though they were never in Battle of the Planets. But nevertheless, you could pick up all of these sort of five toys and add to your range of ostensibly Battle of the Planets toys. Now, as far as I'm aware, these ones and the God Phoenixes and the Gatchaman Spartans that came out, which again were even more removed from Battle of the Planets, being in Gatchaman III, are the only Battle of the Planets toys that we had. I know we had books and annuals and so on, but as far as I know, personally, that's it in terms of our Battle of the Planets offerings in the UK. But even then, obviously, they'd come from Italy and places originally, just the way of it. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed a quick run through of those. And that's the family album shot there of all 5 of them all together. And as I say, you see them like that, and it's a really, really impressive toy range, I think, personally. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm the one who's picked them all up, but it's quite tricky to get them in good quality examples across the entire range. Yeah, I've seen all of these now pop up in varying different states of wear over a period of weeks as I've been trying to pull them all together. And as I say, you could easily be paying, I would say about £80 probably for a really solid version unboxed, or you could go to sort of double that if you want an actual boxed version, but you're probably going to have to bring it in from outside the UK. So you're going to have to pay, obviously, import and postage to a much greater degree than you would do were you just trying to find loose examples. But what fascinates me is that even now, some 40-odd years on, you can still find relatively decent loose examples of these toys. But again, I think it comes down to the fact that they're die-cast. I think they were die-cast. They were probably, I don't know if they were relatively expensive when they came out, but I think they were probably much loved and much played with, and people have probably slotted them away into their attics and so on, so they've stayed preserved. But yeah, I think that as a set is a really, really nice display piece. And for me, they're sort of, I suppose, relatively late examples of Bandai Popy diecast models, which is, an area I'm sort of loosely looking at the moment, just because I think they are so creative. I just think it's a really, really sort of inventive set of designs. And, we obviously, we owe quite a lot of the way that our sort of American kind of derived designs grew up off the back of the Japanese designs like this. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that one. If it's given you a little sort of another itch to scratch, then so much the better, I suspect. It possibly. And on that, I'll leave it because I've got quite a few other ones to have a look at today. Cheers for now. Do like and subscribe.